Good morning. And for those of us that are joining live from all across Thailand and beyond, welcome to the first live streaming Torah class, streaming here from Bangkok. And we thank Eli Gorfel and his family and wish a happy birthday to senior Mr. Gorfel and thank them for helping us put together this wonderful opportunity to teach Torah from the shul in Bangkok, but to have it streaming to people's homes and allow them to study Torah in their place where they are comfortable and where they don't have to beat the traffic, when they're able to just join us. So, for the first time, it's very exciting. And it's very appropriate that the first time we're doing this, making Torah more accessible here in Thailand in this way. It's very appropriate that it's on the first day of the month of, not the first day, but it's the third day of the month of Av, in the 9 days, where we are told during this time where we remember the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we are told we have to do things in order to construct the Beis HaMikdash. And one of the things we do is study more Torah. And we also do more charity. So actually here we're studying Torah, and we're doing, perhaps you could say, just thinking on the spot here, perhaps you could say that we're doing Torah in a charitable way, because we're actually sharing Torah wisdom with people that would otherwise not be able to have this opportunity because they live far away or they're not able to get out of their homes. And here we're actually creating a virtual opportunity and a virtual community. So one of the things of doing live is you have to start on time. So, but when you come to the actual class, maybe sometimes you come and drop late. We don't want people to sit in their living rooms and get agitated, so we started on time. But for those who have just joined us in live, come on in. And we'll get to the, I shouldn't say those who join us live. You're all joining us live. Those that have joined us not virtually, but actually in the flesh. I mean, I can give Shalom Aleichem. I can actually shake hands. So I'll give you a virtual handshake from wherever you are. Okay, we're on the study course. Today we're actually going to be studying something also pertinent to the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, because we're talking about the land of Israel in general, Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's the famous joke that they say in Thailand, that a Thai person asks an Israeli, how many Israelis are there? And he says, well, generally speaking, the population of Israel is 8.5 million perhaps. 75% of them are Jewish, and then you have other. But the guy looks at him, the taxi driver looks and says, no, I don't mean in Thailand. I mean, how many Israelis are there in Israel? Because to the Israelis, to the Thais, obviously, it seems like there's a never-ending supplies of Israelis here in Thailand. But, of course, we know that there's not all that many. We're a small country, barely the size of the state of New Jersey. And we don't have all that many people. But certainly the entire world is, I wouldn't say just fascinated with us, but the entire world seems to be obsessed with us. The space we occupy in the international news is always much, much larger than we are in terms of population proportionately. So why is there this disproportionate fascination with Israel? So obviously we know because Israel is, and nobody's neutral about Israel. Everybody has an opinion about Israel. For, against, the same word, Israel always evokes passions. Why is that? So we know why that is. That's because Israel is a holy land, and it gets the attention, therefore. I'm just going to turn off this gadget so that it doesn't interfere. Shut down. So, we're going to go to text 1b. After the Torah, in yesterday's Torah reading, told us the actual borders of Israel, then the Torah continues and says that Rashi explains, why is it that the Torah has to delineate the borders? I mean, the Torah is not a book of history, or it's not a geography book, certainly. So why does the Torah have to go into such detail about the borders of the land of Israel? And Rashi explains, since many mitzvot apply to the land of Israel, and do not apply outside the land, the Torah found it necessary to chart the outer limits of its boundaries from all sides to inform you that these mitzvot apply anywhere within these borders. I should say anywhere and everywhere within these borders. So in other words, we need to know the borders of the land of Israel, because the land of Israel has a special holiness which brings with it a large amount of mitzvot that are fulfilled only when within the borders of the Holy Land of Israel. So let's now understand what's our special connection to Israel. You know, many of us may never have actually stopped to think about this very consciously. We're on page 29, because we have been, ever since we're little kids, we're thinking about Israel. Our earliest memories possibly are Yom Kippur and Seder night, and both of those nights we say L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim, next year in Yerushalayim. Every day, but for those that daven, daily, 3 times a day, we daven about going back to Israel. So it's something we grow up with even before we begin to analyze or think. It's just something. You ask a Jew, are you connected to Israel? Of course. You ask a Jew who prays, what do you think about Israel? What do you mean? We're all going there one day. So text 2, we have the text from the prayer, actually. Every day, 3 times a day, we pray, raise a banner to gather our exiles, and bring us together from the 4 corners of the earth into our land. Blessed are you, Hashem, who gathers the dispersed of his people Israel. That's one of the blessings. Then there's another blessing where we say, V'techazena, may our eyes behold your, in other words, Hashem's return to Zion, to Israel, in mercy. Blessed are you, Hashem, who restores his divine presence to Zion. So, without even thinking about it, we've been, since early childhood, we know that Israel is something very central to us, very important to us. But let's think about it now rationally. Why Israel? What's so special about Israel? So you do know that today we're blessed to have self-governance in the land of Israel. We have our own government. And let's see, what did they, the Statement of Independence, what were the reasons that the founding fathers, so to speak, of the State of Israel, what were the reasons they used in their Statement of Independence? So in the Scroll of Independence, there's 2 basic themes. One is, the reason it's important to have a homeland in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, is because that's historically where the Jewish people was born. That's historically where the Jewish people, where the prophets lived, where the book of the Tanakh was being developed. Therefore, it's a natural thing that we should go back there. That's where we come from. And the other argument is, the other position is, well, the world agreed, starting with the Balfour Declaration. The British government agreed that there should be a homeland allowed to be established for the people of Israel. And then the United Nations ratified that in 1947. So, and then in 1948 was the Statement of Independence. But the United Nations resolved, the United Nations gave a resolution that, which is irrevocable, that the Jewish people have a right to a homeland in Israel, especially based on all the tragic occurrences during the Holocaust, where it became even more painfully obvious that the Jewish people need a place where they can go. The thing is that those 2 reasons both can be disputed and are disputed by our enemies. Why? Well, just because we were there 3,000 years ago doesn't mean to say that we have the right to be there right now. I mean, there are many nations that were once living somewhere, but then they were either conquered or they moved by choice. Just because we were there doesn't mean we always have to be there. So that's one issue. The other thing is that if we're relying on the United Nations or the fact that the world agrees we have the right to a homeland, well, that's not so simple anymore. There are many that would like to change around that United Nations resolution and say perhaps we don't deserve it because we're being unfair and cruel, all kinds of things that they level against us, all kinds of one-sided, of course, slants, you could call it anti-Semitic perspectives. But this is why, really, when you look to those 2 reasons as reasons, either because historically we're from there, that doesn't mean to say that we still have to be there, or because that's where the world agreed we are allowed to be, or we could be. What happens if the world changes its mind? So it's a little bit shaky. So what's the real reason, the only irrefutable, eternal reason that a Jew can give about why Israel, Eretz Yisrael, the land of the Jews, was, and always will be the land of the Jews? There's only one thing it can really be based upon. And that is, as we read in text 3, the fact that it was given by a covenant to us. So on that day, the Torah says, it's a quote from the Torah, the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, chapter 15, verse 18 to 21. On that day, Hashem formed a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your seed, to your children, I have given this land, from the river of Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates River. But the exact borders we're not going to go into here right now. It's not the subject of this discussion. The land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, and of the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Rephaim, and of the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So basically, we're given the basic borders of what today is the land of Israel, and beyond what probably beyond what many people are comfortable with calling the land of Israel. But certainly what we call Israel today is certainly included in the covenant of what Hashem promised to Abraham. So what's the reason Israel is ours? What's the reason we have a right to it? What's the reason we feel we have a claim to it? What's the reason we feel a Jew feels comfortable saying that once he comes to Israel, he never wants to or has to move anywhere else in the world? Because it's ours. God gave it to us. That's all. Not because the Balfour Declaration, not because that's where the Jews were historically. That can all change. God gave us with a covenant that said Israel is given to the children of Israel. Now, we see that even in the very beginning of the Torah, Hashem found it necessary. The first verse of the Torah is already inserted in order to uphold our ownership claim to the land of Israel. In text 4a, we go to the first pasuk, the first verse of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, Hashem created heavens and earth. First pasuk. It says Rashi, text 4b, in the beginning, said Rabbi Yitzchak, as Rashi quotes, it was not necessary to begin the Torah except from this month is to you. The first mitzvah of the Torah is about how to count the months, how to look at the moon and ascertain that it's the beginning of the new month. So really, the Torah should have begun from the first mitzvah, because the Torah is, after all, a book that tells us mitzvahs. The Torah is not a history book. Why then did he start with the verse that talks about in the beginning Hashem created heaven and earth? In other words, why does the Torah begin with the story of creation? Creation really doesn't have any relevance to how we live our lives per se. I guess except for Shabbos, tells us Hashem rested on the seventh day. But in terms of strictly talking about mitzvahs, he really should have talked about the first mitzvah which was given to them right before the giving of the Torah, which was how to calculate our months. So why does he start though with a story, with the history? And the Rashi says the reason is as follows. Because the strength of his works he related to his people, and told us about the fact that he's the creator, to give them the inheritance of the nations. In other words, if the nations of the world should say to Israel, you are robbers, for you conquered by force the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan. As they say today, you guys are occupiers. It's not a new thing. Rashi was writing this 800 years ago, and this is coming from the Medrash of even earlier. If they come and say, you are robbers, for you conquered the land by force, it really belongs to the 7 nations. They will reply, we the Jewish people will reply, the entire earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. He created it, and gave it whomever He deemed proper. When He wished, He gave it to them, and when He wished, He took it away from them and gave it to us. So, in other words, the Torah begins with an introduction. The introduction being that Hashem is the creator of heaven and earth. Hashem being the creator of heaven and earth, He can then divvy up, He can then divide up the earth in its entirety to whoever He wants. And He chose to give the Jewish people, the Bnei Israel, the holy land of Israel. So, it may not sound sophisticated to say that. That's why many people look for more sophisticated sounding things in their claim to Israel. Well, it's our heritage. We need a place after the Holocaust. Where should we go? Nobody cares for us. We're persecuted everywhere. It's all good and fine, but there are other people that claim now that they are persecuted, and therefore we should give it to them. And historically, there are other people that start to say, the Turks were there. Maybe we should go back to them. How do you decide where to go back? And if historically, originally it belonged to the Canaanites, so maybe go back there. So those answers are going to leave us always with food for opposition. The only answer that really answers it the way it is God gave it to us. Gave it to Abraham, and he promised it from Abraham to Yitzchak to Yaakov. We were all descendants of Yaakov. Yaakov's name was Israel. That's why it's called Eretz Israel. And if we're more comfortable about saying it just the way it is, although it sounds old-fashioned, but if it's the truth, so what if it's old-fashioned? It's the absolute truth. And if you say it, believe it or not, the world will actually, they have nothing to argue against that. The problem is that we keep giving excuses, or we keep giving reasons that they are beating around the bush. Just say it the way it is. So actually, if you think about it that way, many Jews that are not so observant, are very, very proud of being Israelis, and they will fight to protect Israel to the point of self-sacrifice, total self-sacrifice. I mean, all those youngsters, all the people that go to the army, they go to the Miluim, and so on. They're all putting their life on the line for Israel. It's not for a maybe easier to go some other place, but there's no other place we can go because this is the place Hashem gave us. So deep down, everybody believes in the same thing. Some say it, some don't know yet how to say it. But ultimately, that's the strongest and only and true reason why Israel is ours, and it's not negotiable. So, having said that Israel is ours, and the real reason, the ultimate reason, the existential reason is that God gave it to us. Let's now see, how do we approach, so this is something that's a little bit sensitive, but how do we approach the issue of the negotiations with those that wish to take our land or wish to have their own land? How do we look at the concept of negotiations of land for peace, as they call it? So, on the one hand, well, if God gave the Holy Land to us, is it ours to give away? Did He give it to us to give away? No, not really. We gave it to the entire people of Israel, so who's going to make a decision to give it away? But well, you would say anything's more important than saving lives. Nothing is more important than saving lives. Saving lives takes precedence. So if we can save lives by giving up some land, that would be a good thing. However, of course, we have to look at the Torah to see what does the Torah say about that. So there's a fascinating halacha, very explicit law, when it comes to our dealings with our enemies, with those that may seek to infiltrate us and to fight us. So let's look at text 6. The halacha is as follows. It's a halacha, it's a law taught about Shabbos. Okay, about keeping Shabbos. You know that we're not allowed to generally go and do battle on Shabbos, unless it's a must. Generally speaking, we have a voluntary battle. We can choose when to go out and conquer a neighboring land or something, whatever it is. The Shabbos is not a time just to do war. We don't violate the Shabbos for that. However, if Gentiles invade Jewish towns in Israel for monetary matters, for theft, we do not violate the Shabbos to repel them. In other words, if you know that somebody is just coming to steal a valuable, you can't pick up the phone and call the police. If you're sure that there's nothing there, no danger whatsoever, you're just sneaking in and he's going to take something. You cannot call the police. Calling the police would be violating the Shabbos. If there's, of course, any hint of danger, of course you do. But just for money, not. If, however, they invade from matters concerning life and death, obviously you violate the Shabbos and attack them with weapons. You see people coming and they're going to do damage, then you disregard the Shabbos and you go and save lives. How about the following? When there is a Jewish city close to the border, and the enemies, they're coming to mount an attack, but let's say they're coming only for the purpose of taking valueless things, like straw and stubble. Al-iskei teven v'kash, they're coming to take things of no value. We should take up arms and desecrate the Shabbos to repel them. Even if they're just coming for simple, valueless things. Why? The reason is because they're near the border. If you're a border town, says halacha, if we do not prevent their coming, they may conquer the city And if they conquer the border town, from there the rest of the land will be easy for them to conquer. So this is at the heart of the issue in terms of Jewish law about all these negotiations. Jewish law would see that very simply, when you give territory away, you're actually making it more easy to conquer Israel. Now this law is said even outside of Israel. It was actually initially said in the Gemara about Babylon, when there was a large Jewish community living there. Because if there was an infiltration within the Jewish cities, then that would lead also to danger. How much more so in Israel for sure. When we know when we talk about giving away border areas, which is always a discussion, giving away, so to speak, areas that are at the periphery. The problem is, once we do that, it's not harmless. It makes Israel more vulnerable. According to all opinions we've seen, that Israel becomes much more vulnerable the moment that they give away any land. So it's not a question of giving away God's gift. Or it's the holiness of Israel that we can. No. We don't have to lose our lives to maintain the gift Hashem gave us. That's not one of the three things we give up our life for. But what we do give up our life for is to make sure, and what we violate Shabbos for, is to save lives. By allowing our enemies to get closer to us, we become more vulnerable, and for that, there's no negotiation. So this is really the way Jewish law, halacha, looks at it. And of course people say, well, it's a political decision that has to be made. Well, Jews make political decisions, they should be made also by looking at the halacha, by looking at the Torah. So this is just from a pure Torah perspective. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke long and very heartfelt talks about this concept. But always, at the end of the day, coming back to this halacha, to this law, and that is, even if it looks innocuous, even if it looks innocent, they're coming to take something valueless, but if it's giving access, if it's a border town, if it's making the actual community more vulnerable, then there's nothing to negotiate about. You will ask, on the other side there are also people, and there's an issue, and we have to be kind to every human being. That's true. There is an issue, and if there was a magic wand to take care of it, I'm sure the magic wand would have been waved. It is a very difficult and important and emotional issue, and has to be thought about. But the red lines are mentioned right here. And we can't give away areas that will make Israel more vulnerable. But at any rate, it's not a discussion, a political discussion. I'm just teaching Torah, and that's the way it's taught in the Torah, so I'm sharing that. Because it is important to our general discussion here, which is that Israel has to be looked at. A Jew looks at Israel from the context of holiness. In other words, it's not just our ancestral land. Like, let's say, the Indians would say that they're ancestral. The Aborigines in Australia have ancestral rights. They have the lands that their forefathers inhabited it, and therefore they have the rights to that. Similarly, there are some Indian areas and so on, in America perhaps. This is not about ancestral rights. Or, shall I say, it's not about the fact that our ancestors lived there. They moved from there. They went other places. This is about the fact that this is an eternal gift given to us by Hashem. And you will see that actually the fact that Hashem gives it to us makes it holy. Now let's see, what is the mission of the land of Israel? What's meant to be done there? So we see here from the Medrash about Avraham Avinu. The first Jew that was told to go to Israel was Abraham, our forefather. So it says, and God said to Abraham, go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. The intention here was to go to the land of Israel. Rabbi Berachia said, what did Abraham resemble? A bottle of perfume sealed and lying in a corner. Therefore, its fragrant smell did not waft. If it's just lying and not moving, the fragrance stays in the jar. When it was moved, however, its fragrance wafted. Similarly, Hashem said to Abraham, travel from place to place, and your name will become great in the world. Where does he go? He sends him to the land of Israel. That's where he's supposed to teach about God. In text 8a, we see what did he do in the land of Israel. And he planted an Eshel in Beersheba, and he called there in the name of the Lord, the God of the world. What does it mean he called there? He got up there and he took a megaphone and he says, Hashem is the king! Hashem is the... Okay, you can do that. There are some people that do that on the street corners. But what does that do? So let me say, Rashi explains a little bit deeper than that. He made a change in the environment. He made a change in the society. How did he do that? And he called it. What did he do? By means of that Eshel. Eshel means he created either it's a great tree which provides a lot of shade in the desert, or an Eshel is from was like a lodging house, like an inn where you could eat, drink, sleep. But by means of that inn, the name of the Holy One, Hashem, was proclaimed to the entire world. How did he do it? He would give people to eat and to drink. After his guests would eat and drink, Abraham would say to them, now you should bless Hashem, whose food you have eaten. You think you ate my food? No. Hashem is the creator of heaven and earth. You eat Hashem's food. And of course, once people had that valuable experience of enjoying what Abraham had to offer, now when he told them that they should give thanks to the one who really provided for them, this made an impression, so much so that as Reish Lakish says in text 8c, Reish Lakish says that this word Vayikra, we shouldn't read as Vayikra, he called out, but Vayakri, he made others call in the name of God. In other words, he was teaching others to believe in God, and therefore, thereby creating a movement where belief in God would be a common and popular thing. And so this is what was happening in the land of Israel. Israel was the center of spirituality, of Abrahamic spirituality, of teaching of the one God. And this is also the way it continues. As the Kuzari says, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, this land of Israel was appointed and designated to teach the proper way of behavior to the entire world. As it is stated in the prophecy of Yeshaya, for from Zion will come forth the Torah and the word of God from Yerushalayim. So what is really Israel all about? It's the place where holiness is, where Torah comes forth. Starting from Avraham, we taught the Torah there, continuing to the prophets, continuing even actually till today. Today it's returned once more to the great yeshivas. After many years where we were banished, we were not in Israel. Today many of the great yeshivas are actually in Israel. Many of the great Hasidic courts that were once in Eastern Europe relocated to Israel. Today Israel, of course, once more, a place where we see clearly a lot of Torah, a lot of holiness. But how did that come about? Is Israel a more spiritual place? Is the land of Israel simply more spiritual? It's what? Its sand is not so sandy, it's less coarse? No. The land becomes holy because Hashem chooses it. Hashem doesn't choose it. There's two ways we can look at it. Was Hashem looking at the world he created? He says, you know what, Israel, it's got some edelkeit, it's got some extra sensitivity, some extra finesse. That's gonna be the land I'm gonna give to the Jews. Or is it God says, look, this is the land I'm giving to the Jews. It's my choice to give this land, and once God chooses it, obviously it becomes more holy. So here the Rebbe sets it forth for us in a talk. God's choice of the land of Israel was not due to the holiness that is in it. On the contrary, the holiness comes as a result of God's choice. God's decision to choose the land of Israel was a bechira atzmit, a completely pure, free choice made of God's own essential power of free will. That this be his heritage. This may be a reversal of the usual way in which people think about Eretz Yisrael. Often when you tell someone that Israel is special, they will say, of course it's special. Look at all the historical events and important Jewish things that occurred there. But this is a reversal of cause and effect. It's like saying that the car is overheating because the temperature gauge says that it's very hot. The reason, it's a reverse. The temperature gauge says it's hot because the car is overheating. Similarly, the reason so many important historical Jewish events happened in the land of Israel is because Israel is the land that Hashem chose to be a special land. It's the reverse. What this means is that while all lands have a specific contribution to the world and a unique character, the unique contribution and character of Israel is its conduciveness to sanctity. Some people think that the contribution of Israel to the world is high-tech. Israel has a lot to contribute, startups and high-tech. That's also, but that's not the unique contribution. Technically, if all the Jews went to Silicon Valley, they'd also have all those, and there are a lot of startups and high-techs there as well. What's unique to Israel that's not replicated anywhere else in the world is the fact that Israel is a place that's the most conducive for sanctity. It's the holiest place here on earth. We can illustrate this idea of a special land chosen by God as follows. No two people are exactly alike. Everyone accepts this fact. After all, who wants a clone of oneself? Each and every person can contribute uniquely to his or her family, community, and nation, and as it were to God, doing something no one else can. And God has chosen a unique role for every human being to play within His world. We also sense this about time. No day is exactly like another. Shabbat feels different from a weekday, Pesach feels different from Shabbat, and even from other holidays. Someone with spiritual sensitivity can distinguish even one weekday from the next. And perhaps all of us can distinguish Mondays. In Thailand, we have a lot of traffic on Monday. Although, if you have traffic on Tuesday, asking why is there traffic, he says, because it's Tuesday. He says, 1 second, but yesterday you said there's traffic because it's fun. Okay, but still in all. This concept applies to location as well. Every country has its own character and lifestyle. And the country that was chosen as the environment in which the Jewish mission can be fulfilled is Eretz Yisrael. What emerges from all this is that in reality, Israel is not special because of what has happened there, because that's where God told Abraham to go. It's special because Hashem chose it to be the launching pad of holiness and Torah in the world. This is the Holy Land. In every culture, in every language, Israel is called the Holy Land. You'll never hear the Holy Land being said about Tibet. You'll never hear the Holy Land being said about Canada or any other country. When you say the Holy Land today, I'm going to the Holy Land, everybody knows what you mean. In any language. You mean Israel. Now, but it's interesting. Hashem chooses Israel to be the Holy Land. And that's why it becomes the Holy Land. But we can also see within the geography of Israel and also within the way Israel survives in terms of their agriculture, we'll be able to see that these concepts of being the center, being the launching pad of holiness and Torah in the world, actually fits into the actual positioning of Israel itself, which is the way, of course, Hashem positioned it. Here there's a text from text 10 from Arya Kaplan. It says a very interesting thing. If Israel is the place that has to bring forth sanctity, holiness, so it should be really centrally located, right? So if you look at a map, you'll see that the geographical location of the land of Israel virtually guaranteed that it would play a key role in the tides of civilization. The old world consisted of two great land masses, Eurasia, that's Europe and Asia, and Africa. It was impossible to travel from Eurasia to Africa without passing through the Holy Land. Therefore, every conqueror, every civilization that passed from one continent to the other had to pass through the Holy Land and come in contact with a Jew. Besides being a gateway between North and South, the Holy Land is part of the keystone link between East and West. There are mountains in Israel where a cup of water spilled on the western slope will eventually flow into the Atlantic Ocean, while once spilled on the eastern slope will flow into the Pacific. Geography is not my forte, so can't really comment so much on this. Today, these oceans are linked by the Suez Canal, but in the past, most caravan routes linking the Atlantic and Pacific passed directly through the Holy Land. The land of Israel is therefore literally the crossroads of civilization. And so, it would be a great location, being that Hashem's mission for the land of Israel, that should be the center of spreading spirituality. The spirituality that Judaism teaches is not just for the Jewish people, it's for the entire world. The entire world doesn't have to become Jewish, but the entire world needs to be, God's plan needs to be observant of the 7 laws of Noah, first of which is believing in God. there's something else. Besides from being strategically located to be the center of spreading the spiritual ethos and values of Judaism to the world, there's also something about the agricultural situation. What is that? The Jewish people were told that the land they're coming to is not like Egypt. In what does the land of Israel differ from Egypt? So text 11a, a pasuk from Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 11, verse 10. For the land to which you are coming to possess is not like the land of Egypt out of which you came, where you sowed your seed and which you watered by foot like a vegetable garden. But the land to which you pass to possess is a land of mountains and valleys, and absorbs water from the rains of heaven. Why is it? In other words, Egypt, the Nile rises, you have natural irrigation, and you have a more dependable form, a more dependable source for the irrigation of the fields. Whereas Israel needs to rely on rain. If there's one thing that's really undependable, in terms of, even today, in terms of our scientific advances, it's rain. Only our enemies claim if there's a torrential downpour, there's a thing they claim we somehow orchestrated the rain against them. But we know that rain, we need to turn to God. So why is it that way? Why does Hashem make it that way? So look how the Rebbe sheds light on it. Why did God set up a situation in which Israel's rain only comes from above? One of the reasons is so that in this way everybody will turn their eyes heavenward. When a person knows that he has to rely upon the rain of heaven, that even when he has an abundance, he's prevented, but he needs God to send rain. So he's prevented from making the mistake detailed in the verse. The Torah tells us that one of the natural things that happens when we become wealthy, and your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and gold increases, and all that you have increases, what does the Torah says? What very often happens because of that? And your heart grows haughty, and you forget Hashem. How many times have we seen this? People that are blessed with so many good things, they forget where it comes from. They start becoming arrogant. They start losing their gratefulness to Hashem. When you have to wait for rain, and as much as you have to go and say, "Oh Hashem, please send us the rain." You have to pray for the rain. This reminds us that no matter how much effort he puts into the land by plowing and planting, he still requires the divine input of rain. Contrast this with living in Egypt, where Hashem established the natural order such that at specific times the Nile rises and waters the field. To the physical eyes, because Hashem's doing this too, but to the physical eyes, this happens without any need for divine input, lulling a person into telling himself, "My strength and the might of my hand has accumulated this wealth for me." And God forbid, forget completely the next verse, which states that you must remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives the strength to acquire wealth. It's a very important. We were once sitting at a Hasidic gathering at Fabrengen, and one of the younger shluchim was asking a senior shliach how to make sure to always stay focused and spiritual and prayerful. Told him, make sure to take a big mortgage, buy a synagogue, buy a Chabad house. And if you take a big mortgage, you have to constantly make mortgage payments. It's very difficult to make big monthly mortgage payments. If you have to make them, you probably won't know where the money's going to come from. So you'll have to pray a lot. If you have to pray a lot and look to God, so you'll be more spiritual, you'll be more connected. It was a joke, but it's not a joke. There is something, sometimes we see that, I've met people that move from being employed to being self-employed. And very often, there are some people like being self-employed, they don't like taking orders from other people. But for somebody who's okay with taking instructions from others, there's something very, very reliable and comforting about getting a monthly paycheck. When one moves over to become a freelancer, for example, become self-employed, there's a great pressure. Why? Even when you're getting a paycheck, it's from Hashem also. But somehow you understand that you did work for the employer, you don't know if the employer has money or not, but you figure if he hired you, and he didn't fire you, so he's still going to pay you. But when you're out there on your own, you have a kind of a stability in your mind. When you're out there on your own, self-employed, you have only one place to look. Of course you have the business and you try and make it happen. But ultimately you really see how it's all coming from Hashem. So there's a beauty to that. For some people, if somebody's not built for that, it can make them crazy. It can make them a lot of pressure. So you have to know, what your circumstances and what you're built for. But there is a great blessing in that. The great blessing in that is that somebody who's self-employed has an ongoing dialogue, so to speak, with Hashem about his simple livelihood. And that's why Hashem makes Israel to be, in a sense, that way. In Israel, there's no dependable source of water. You have to wait for the rain. Even today in 2016, when there's a lack of water, everybody's counting to see in the Kinneret how much the Kinneret has gone down. Everybody's talking about the Batzoret and so on. And when there's a lot of rain, it's the only country in the world where I see where it rains. I haven't been in every country in the world, but it's certainly a country where I haven't seen people really speaking about rain as being an inconvenience. You see many people that, it's rain, thank God it's raining. But what do you mean? You're going to have to get wet when you go to the bus. Okay, we'll deal with that. But we know that rain is good. And we know how much we still depend on rain, even today. Hashem does that, makes that land that way, because this is a land where our dialogue with Hashem, where our awareness of Hashem has to be more intense. And it starts from from God Himself. As it says in text 12a, in the Pasuk in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 12. Israel is a land that Hashem your God looks after. The eyes of Hashem your God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. What does that mean, the eyes of Hashem? Hashem sees everything. He doesn't have eyes, first of all. But it means He sees everything, Hashem sees everything. So what does it mean that Hashem's eyes, so to speak, His focus is more on Israel? It says Maimonides, in Moreh Nevuchim, Guide for the Perplexed, the eye of Hashem your God are always upon it, means that His providence is upon it. There is more divine providence in an evident and clear and open way. And this verse was the basis of why during the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, the Rabbi Rebbe encouraged people not to leave Israel, even while Saddam Hussein was promising to rain down scuds on Israel, and that Israel is the safest place in the world. And I remember when that first scud fell, I was in New York, and we ran to the home of a friend whose parents had a TV to see CNN. Everybody was shocked. The Rebbe said that the Torah says Israel is the safest place in the world for a Jew. And the scud fell, but miraculously, the 39 scuds that fell did not cost lives in Israel. Open divine providence and miracle. Israel is a place, if you read about it, Israel is a place where people see Hashgacha Pratit, divine providence, in a more obvious and more revealed way. It's a holier, physically holier place. It's a place where, as the Torah promises, Hashem's eyes are on it constantly. So therefore, even though it sounds ludicrous to say Israel is the safest long-term place for a Jew, that's what the Torah tells us. Hashem's focus is on them more. Where would you want to be other than in Hashem's focus? Where would you want to be? Would you want to be closer to Hashem? Where would you feel more secure? Closer to Hashem or further from God forbid? Obviously closer. So that's why that's what Israel is. It's given to us by Hashem. He chose it and therefore it becomes holy. And He also manifests, the holiness actually manifests itself in the land of Israel. It's actually the only place a Jew can come and know that when he buys a piece of land there, he buys a home there, he's never going to have to move if he doesn't want to. Any other place, we're all waiting for Mashiach. May have to move. In Israel, that's a place of permanence. Now, because Israel is a holy place, in a holy place you got to act holy. You don't come into a library and start screaming. They'll kick you out. Hear what the Torah says about the nature of the land of Israel, how we have to respect it. Text 13. You shall not defile yourselves by any of these things, these bad things that the nations do, immoral things. For the nations who I am sending away from before you have defiled themselves with all these things. They've dirtied and sullied themselves. And the land became defiled. And I visited its sins upon it, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. So why were our enemies kicked out of Israel? Because they acted in a way that's inappropriate for Israel. Ultimately, a holy land can only tolerate holy behavior. But as for you, the Jewish people, you shall observe my statutes and my ordinances, and you shall not do like any of these abominations, neither the native nor the stranger who sojourns among you. For the people of the land who preceded you did all of these abominations, and the land became defiled. and let the land not vomit you out for having defiled it, as it vomited out the nation that preceded you. In other words, let's say it this way, the Rebbe would sometimes write to people before they move to Israel, you need a visa. Well, a Jew doesn't need a visa to go to Israel. He says, no, you need a spiritual visa. You're going to a spiritually uplifted place, you have to make sure you look a little nicer, a little more spiritual than you look perhaps when you're in your schlumpy place, your regular place. And, although some may ask, that there seems to be plenty of behavior in Israel which is not appropriate to the sanctity of Israel. But let's not get caught up by that. Let's realize that there's amazing behavior in Israel as well. There's a lot of very, very, very holy behavior. And there's a small part that also maybe acts not in such a holy way, but generally speaking, the Jewish people appreciate and sanctify the Holy Land and do holy things there. And so therefore they are there, and the land is very proud and pleased that we're there. It's most potent and important and vivifying Jewish life. It's unbelievable. The streets, you feel Shabbos, you feel the holidays, Chanukah. There's something there. People say it's also difficult. Well, it's not unusual that good things have some difficulties also. When there's more holiness, there's more frustration, there's also more challenge. Hashem creates a balance in the world. At any rate, Israel is the Holy Land because God chooses it, and there is a place where spirituality is more manifest, and therefore that's a place where we need to be more mindful of our spirituality as well. And this is not just something that is somehow spiritual and doesn't attach to the physical. Look at these stories from the Talmud. Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina used to kiss the stones of Akko, saying, until here is the border of the land of Israel. Kiss the stones, because the stone is holy. Rabbi Zera crossed the Jordan while wearing his clothing. He didn't want to take off his clothing to go through the water. It would be disrespectful to the Jordan, which was already part of Israel. Rabbi Chia bar Barba used to roll around in the dust of Tiberias. It's holy dust. Rabbi Chia the Great used to weigh the stones of the land of Israel. He says, holy stones. Rabbi Hanani used to weigh the clods of the earth of the land of Israel to show his belovedness to the land. So they fulfilled what is written, for your servants have desired its stones, and its dust they have cherished. And we know when we bury it, we also do a similar thing. We try and insert, even when we bury people outside of Israel, we try and put in Afar Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Because that's a special dust, a special earth. Somebody just sent me a scan, the letters that my grandfather in Australia, my father's father, wrote probably in the 1960s, or earlier perhaps, maybe even maybe we're talking the 40s, to the Kolal Chabad organization in Yerushalayim to please send earth from Israel, because they need to use it for burials. Not a huge amount, but a small amount, because even the earth there is holy. So now, what does that tell us? We're sitting here and having this class, many of us are not in Israel. So that's it, we can't... And what about the people in Israel? Well, the earth is holy. I'm fine, I'm scot-free, I don't have to do anything. No. We need to internalize this holiness as well. When you live in a holy land, you need to do holy things as well. And when you don't live in a holy land, you also have to create an environment of holiness as if you were in a holy land. So that even though you're not physically in the holy land, but at least you create an environment which is as close as possible to holiness, so that you should be also enveloped in a place of holiness. And here we have the famous statement made by the Rebbe of Tzemach Tzedek, you see in 15a. The Chassid once asked the Tzemach Tzedek whether he should settle in the Holy Land so that he could devote his life there to Torah study and the service of Hashem. Tzemach Tzedek replied, Mach da Eretz Yisrael, in the Yiddish means make Eretz Yisrael here. In other words, his particular service of Hashem was not to experience the physical location that already has the spiritual energies of Israel, but to extend those spiritual energies of Israel into his existing environment. So what is life about? Life is about transforming our own environments into holier places. So Israel is a holy place. You can go into Israel or you can bring Israel into you. Mind you, when you go into Israel, you also still have to bring Israel into you. It's not enough just to live in Israel. On the contrary, when you live in Israel now, you should be living a more holy life. Your observance should be upgraded. If we're not living in Israel, then we have to work even harder to try and recreate, to try and create an environment of Israel. Israel being, of course, not just the land we happen to come from historically, or a land. No, there are some parts of Israel we don't want to make ourselves like Israel. There are some elements of modern day Israel which, they're sometimes not always the most polite or whatever it is. No, that's not what we mean. We mean the concept of Eretz Yisrael, the holy land of Israel. That's what we mean when we say we need to make the atmosphere of Israel here. How do we do that? By doing more mitzvahs, studying more Torah, and so on and so forth. As Deborah says and explains this and qualifies this, even though this place is not the land of Israel, the fact that we are found in the diaspora at present is not mere happenstance. It's not just by coincidence. Divine providence dictates that there is a godly intent and purpose in the present circumstance that is linked to the service of the land of Israel. The intent of this service is to make the rest of the world a dwelling place for the divine. Or as the Tzemach Tzedek termed it, make Eretz Yisrael here, where godliness is evident. We need to make the whole world like that. Since the Jew is called Israel, every Jew is called Israel. He's provided with the strength to transform the diaspora environment into a Eretz Yisrael. If Israel is the place you're living, and if you're called an Israelite, we're all called Bnei Yisrael, Bnei or Benot Yisrael, we're all called children of Israel. We're children of Israel. We can make, our mission is to create and make our environment also Israeli in the sense of holy. This is why the Yalkut Shimoni, the Medrash says, that in the Messianic age, Yerushalayim will spread to encompass all of Israel. And Israel will spread to encompass the entire world. What do we mean by that? This is not a geopolitical statement which is intended that Israel will conquer the entire world and dominate. Imagine if the world language would be not English, but Hebrew. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about here a state of being. We're talking about here a state of holiness. As the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, explains in the Likutei Torah, here we quoted in 16. The meaning of this statement that the whole world, that Israel will spread to the entire world, is that in Messianic times, when Mashiach comes, the world overall will attain the spiritual standing that Israel enjoys today, the spiritual standing. By the same token, Israel itself will then rise to a superior level of the holy city of Yerushalayim, which will in turn be elevated to even higher spiritual levels. So Yerushalayim will become higher, the whole Israel will become like today's Yerushalayim, the whole world will become like today's Israel in terms of spiritual stature. The Messianic age will in fact see an elevation of the entire universe, including all the spiritual realms. In the Messianic era, the world will be cleansed of impurity, as it is written, and I will remove the spirit of impurity from the land. Thus, even the rest of the world which now conceals God's presence will not present an impediment to the open revelation of godliness. The entire world at that time will enjoy a manifestation in the manner in which God is revealed even today in the land of Israel. That is, the meaning of the teaching that in Messianic times, the land of Israel, in other words, its spiritual status will spread over the entire world. And Israel itself, along with the entire spiritual hierarchy of creation, will then rise to even higher spiritual levels. So, to sum up, to wrap up what we've been saying here. We're given the land of Israel. We read about it yesterday's portion. Hashem gives us the borders of not a very big land, but a well-defined and well-positioned, strategically positioned land. Land flowing with milk and honey. And because He chooses, the reason it's ours is because He gives it to us. He gives it to us, and therefore it becomes a holy land. He gives it to us so that we should be, as a holy people. Look, there are three things. When we talk about completeness, that's what we always talk about, shleimut ha'am. The people has to be complete. In other words, the Jewish people has to be a people that's wholesome. Wholesome meaning that their Jewish pedigree is impeccable. In other words, that either the Jews, the community of the Jewish people consists of people that have Jewish lineage, in other words, at least a Jewish mother, or those that convert according to the laws of the Torah, according to Halacha. That's Shleimut Ha'am, a wholesome people. That is an eternal people, because God chooses them. We have Shleimut Ha'aretz, a wholesomeness of the land of Israel, which means that we understand that Israel is ours because God, like the Jewish people is God's people, because God chooses them, otherwise they're just like everybody else. Israel is a special country because God chooses it. Shleimut HaTorah, we need to also know that Torah should be wholesome by us. No picking and choosing, I like this mitzvah, I don't like that mitzvah. The mitzvah, the Torah in its entirety is given to us by God. So these three godly things are eternal. And the Jewish people is given the land of Israel and the Torah to live by. So those three things are an axis. They all go together. And when we're fearless and unabashed and unembarrassed to say Israel is ours because God gave it to us, we don't have to beat around the bush. Jews very often beat around. When we would stand on the streets of Manhattan asking people in the mitzvah times, are you Jewish? The moment the guy starts saying, well, what do you mean by that question? You know right away he's Jewish. A non-Jew has no problem saying, are you Jewish? He goes, what? No. A Jew, many will say yes, but many, they're not exactly sure how to answer that question. Yes, well, kind of. I used to be, it's my parents. No. Just say the truth. Even the non-Jew, as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says, non-Jews respect Jews who respect their Judaism. Non-Jews do not respect Jews who do not respect their Judaism. And it goes that way about Israel as well. Say it the way it is. Oh, what are you doing, occupy? Excuse me. I believe in God. And God said, it's in the Bible, all the major religions, it's in the Bible. The Bible says, God said to Abraham, I'm giving it to your children. And God says, your child, your choice child is Yitzchak. And God says to Yitzchak, your choice child is Yaakov. And we all come from Yaakov. The land is ours because God gave it to us. As they say in Russian, Vsyo, that's it. Nothing. End of discussion. Yeah, but what? Sorry. You have complaints, go to God. The same way we can't change the Torah, we can't change the fact that Israel was given to us. And we can't change how we make Jews. Jews, there's one way, to be born Jewish, or to become a Jew according to the way that the Torah says, which is acceptance of all the mitzvahs by a halachic beit din and so on. So we have all these three things that they are, God chooses them, they are eternal, and the best way to deal with them, with ourselves and with others, is just to say the truth. It sounds fundamentalist, it is. It's the fundamentals. It's the Word of God. And this reminds us that that's why Israel is holy. Israel is special. It's great to have so many smart people in one country. And Jews, genetically, I don't think are smarter than anybody else. I shouldn't say that, I've never checked it, but being Jewish is nothing about genetics. About spiritual genetics, spiritual DNA, about the soul. Having so many smart people makes us the greatest country for innovation. That's not what makes Israel special. What makes Israel special is it's a holy land. And therefore, what we have to focus on when we go to Israel, when we live in Israel, is make sure that we're living up to the level of holiness that makes sense, that fits with the land of Israel. And for those of us that aren't living in Israel, we have to make sure to try and make our environments more spiritual so that at least the immediate environs in which we live, we should be breathing and living as if we were in Israel. May Hashem bring us Mashiach and take us back quite literally, and not virtually, but literally to the land of Israel, the coming of Mashiach, speedily in our days. Amen. For all of our live viewers, thank you for joining.
Amen.